The world's so corrupt, somebody sold us up. The river without a boat there to hold us up. It's made of gold, it runneth over, man, they hold a cup. We hold a cup that has a hole, is that coal or what? What we learn to really burn like third degree.
Hey, this is Coach Wheeler, and today I'm joined by the very special guest, Masta Ace, hip-hop legend, Juice Crew all-star, hip-hop icon. And here we're going to talk today a little bit about the work I'm doing as a life coach. Me and Ace previously got together when I was doing some rap music, and Ace featured on a song of mine called Mankind. That's how we know each other. Since then, Ace has continued to do what he does best in the rap game, doing lots of amazing albums with your recent work, Richmond Hill, with Marco Polo. And I believe you're writing a musical as well.
Yeah.
And then since then, I've been, my new endeavour as a life coach, I've built a little practice. I have people that I'm working with for many different things, from depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, relationship issues, purpose, finding themselves, and how we kind of cope with that. And Ace has kindly joined me today so we can talk a little bit about the man behind the music, the people that know you as Masta Ace, but it's really about you as a father, a husband, and the man you are. So I guess that leads to my first question. How do you sort of find balance between being Masta Ace and how a lot of people see you, but then also the other side, the people that you are, I know recently with Mr. C, you guys go a long way back together. Lachey has talked a lot about it, and how you are as a father to Milan and as a husband. Where do you find your power and your balance? How do you find that?
Well, I basically kind of compartmentalize the two people. Me as the man, the husband, the father. In my mind, that's who I am. This other character, known to many as Masta Ace, who does albums and performs on stage, that's a separate person to me in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
There is overlap, but what I'm trying to say is the only time that I'm Masta Ace is when I step on stage to perform,
okay,
or I step into the studio to record music.
Yeah.
I don't walk around in my regular daily life, going to the supermarket or to the store or whatever, and in my mind, I'm Masta Ace. That's why if somebody comes up to me in a public place and they happen to recognize me and speak to me, I'm always surprised. I'm like, oh okay, yeah, that's me. But I don't look for it. There's some artists there's some of my contemporaries, some of my friends who are always in character. What I mean by that is they're always walking around as their artist name, their stage persona.
Yeah.
And I really keep those two things separate. I coached high school football for 11 years.
Okay.
And during those 11 years of coaching, at no point did I make the kids that were on the team aware of this other persona.
Yeah.
Some of them sort of found out through the grapevine.
Yeah.
You know your coach is a hip hop legend or whatever, and they start doing their own little research, Google searches or whatever.
Yeah.
And but anytime they've approached me and said, "Hey, coach, I hear you used to rap or you rap or whatever," and I always shut it down. Like,
wow. Okay.
I never engage in the conversation. I tell them I'm Coach Ace.
Yep.
And I'm here to coach football.
Okay.
The rest of that stuff is not important, and it has no bearing on what we're doing here in this program. And
yeah.
I've never engaged any of my student athletes in music conversations and conversations about what I've done in my career. There's even been times where I've had to leave the team to go do a tour or a big festival. So I'll be like, oh, guys, I'm going to miss next week's game, but I'll be back the following week. And I'll go travel to Europe for 2 weeks.
And you wouldn't tell them?
And I wouldn't tell them. I would just be like, I'll be away, I'll be back.
Yeah, wow.
And so, during the course of my 11 years of coaching, I probably missed a game here or there. Maybe I made sure that I didn't miss more than like a week or a week of practice, a game, and then the following week. So, yeah, it would be like a 2-week run where I'd go out, do a bunch of shows around Europe and get back home in time for the next game.
Yeah.
And never have any conversation other than, I would talk to the coaches on the staff. Like we're the same age, so we can talk about that stuff.
Yeah.
But never with the kids or around the kids. And I think that's what, to answer your question, that's what I do.
You compartmentalize it.
I compartmentalize it, and there's really two different worlds, and I try not to overlap those worlds too much.
And do you think that brings you a sort of, because that's kind of a strong mindset thing to do, because it must be, even calling yourself Coach Ace, you know, there's still a part of you there, but it's like, I mean, obviously your name's Duval Clear, so do a lot of people call you Duval, or do people still, because the name is so big, do people like, yeah, it's Coach Ace, and yeah, that's Ace? Is that kind of like a nickname that you can still separate from the artist and the man?
Yeah, because they didn't know the origin of Ace anyway.
No.
And so I just felt like it was easier and easier to remember, because when I first walking into this program, they don't know me, and I just felt like having them call me Coach Duval or Coach Clear would have been. I just felt like Coach Ace was a snappier, catchier name for the kids to grasp.
And it's probably easier if someone does say, yeah, that's Coach Ace, because they know you as Masta Ace. The kids wouldn't get confused.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I suppose on that as well, do you use any sort of mindset tips or practices that you would use? You know, because when we talked, I know in an interview you said before, like people said to you, who are your inspirations? And obviously they were talking about you as the artist, and you said LL Cool J, Rakim, Big Daddy Kane, obviously because of the Juice Crew. Kane was my sort of, you know, lyrical person. Kane and Rakim, I don't think anyone could sort of not do that. But do you have any sort of personal sort of like mentors or people that you looked up to that are outside of music that helped you as a person to be a good father and a good husband, a good coach? You know, that kind of thing. Because I have, you know, I read the Stoics. I have people like Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn, these motivational speakers that I use for my psychology. But even the Stoics like Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, some of their teachings, they're very old-fashioned and traditional, but they help me as a man and also as a coach, as a life coach. So was there anyone that you used that inspired you outside of music? Because the music one, not as easy, but, you know, Rakim, blah blah blah. We can know that. But for you as a person, was there anyone that you sort of looked up to? Who did you use?
Absolutely. The first was my mother, because she kind of instilled those early values in me. And I'll say my mother / grandmother, because my grandmother was there as a support. She was like the support staff to my mother, because whenever my mother was off working or out trying to find a new career, my grandmother was my guardian and the person that made sure I ate, made sure I went to bed took a shower, went to bed at night at the right time.
Did your studies?
Did my studies, yes. So it's my mother / grandmother. That combination was the first big influence.
Yeah.
For me, and I think what I learned for both of them is what love felt like and what it looked like. I got kisses, like my grandmother would kiss me and hug on me, and and I came to realize that not every kid in my neighborhood, in my conditions, got that, and so a lot of the kids in my neighborhood, I didn't understand it at first when I was young. I didn't understand why they were so angry and so wanting to fight everyone and get into all kind of crazy street stuff.
Yeah.
It's because they didn't have love in their life. And I was one of the fortunate kids that had love.
Yeah.
So that was huge.
Yeah.
And those lessons, those valuable, lessons of how to move as a young person around Brooklyn, New York, and how to avoid negative influences, how to say no to certain things, how to be a leader instead of a follower, because there were instances that happened in my life where I had the opportunity to venture out into the street,
to take the wrong route.
Yeah. I have a very vivid memory of a day when me and my best friend, he was my best friend from probably third grade through 6th grade. Like we hung out every single day. I was at his house every single day.
Yeah, he was your boy.
Yeah. So I remember us. We were in the neighborhood. We had football in common. We loved to play football in the neighborhood. You know, this is the type of friends we were. There were we had football helmets, right? And I remember this particular winter, we got the first snow of the winter. And I had been dying to wear my helmet. I wanted to play in the snow. I had never played football in the snow before. I was like, and he had the same, you know, desire to
Yeah.
I want to play in the snow. I want to play football in the snow.
Yeah.
And it was dark out. It was probably like maybe 7 p.m. And I called him up and his mother gave him permission. My grandmother gave me permission. We went outside in front of my building, on the grass in front of the building, and we played an entire football game 1-on-1.
Wow. In the snow.
And in the snow. Yeah. And it was so much fun. So that's the type of friends that we were.
Yes. Yeah.
And so then when we got into our early teens, I remember we were playing a game of two-hand touch football, and these guys from our neighborhood, from the projects, that were known criminals, and this was early in their criminal careers. They were out there snatching purses. At the time, snatching jewelry was a big thing, so they were out there snatching jewelry from women and doing those kinds of things. And it came over to the game, kind of stopped the game, and they basically were recruiting. And they were like, "Yo, who wants to go with us? We're about to go, you know, on this main street called Pickens Avenue. We're about to go get some money. Who wants to go?" And my best friend at the time was like, "I'll go. I'm going." And he said, "You want to go? Val, you want to go?" I'm like, "Nah.
I'm good. Yeah.
I'm good. I'm gonna keep playing football."
Yeah.
And he left. And he went with those guys.
Yes.
I kept playing football. And I remember that day so vividly because our relationship, from that moment, we went opposite directions.
Yes.
Because
How old were you when that moment happened? Like 15, 14, 15?
Like 14. Yeah, I was like 14.
Yeah, so at a delicate age.
Very delicate age. And that was a huge influential age for me. And I remember saying no. And it wasn't until many, many years later that I wondered, how did I have it in me at 14 to just be like, no?
Yeah. And you do you put that down to your mother and your grandmother?
It has to be. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. It's funny you say that because a lot of the stuff I do, I think we have a moral compass, but you know, sometimes people have a natural proclivity to do the right things without knowing why, and it's only when you become a bit older and a bit wiser and a bit more intelligent. For me, that was the case anyway, and there was a lot of things that I wanted to do naturally, but society, my parents, our social standing, you know, kind of, I fell into some traps. But I knew when I was in there, I thought, man, this isn't me. I know I can do better than that. So it's what's led me to where I am today, you know, helping people and doing what I do. Because I've got a passion for it. You know, when I was doing the music, where we obviously connected, I loved that, and I felt it was something I was good at. I was really good with words, but I didn't feel like it was my natural place. You know, and you talking about that natural instinct that you had. Sometimes we have it, we're not sure why we have it, but we hold on to it. Other times we have to learn the lesson to think, no, I've got to go back to the real me and be me. So it's interesting you say that, and I love that little story that you and your mate is kind of like, he just, you know, that was the parting of our friendships, but it was almost probably the realization that when you look back at that not the birth of you because you were always there, but the realization that you were not like that.
Right. And from that moment, from that day, you know, I was off to high school later that year. And then I did 4 years of high school. And during those 4 years of high school, he was out committing crimes with those guys.
Yeah.
And the same year that I went to college, he went to jail.
Yeah.
And he had spent, you know, the same time I was in college, those 4 years I was away in college, he was in and out of jail. I don't know how many times.
He was doing buried.
I lost touch, so I don't even know what his whole route. But I know that I would hear, you know, what's up with him? Oh, he's locked up again.
Do you ever see him again? Do you ever see him now? You're the same age. Do you ever cross paths or?
He came to my 50th birthday party.
Oh, cool! Wow. So you still friends, or just on a different level, or?
Nah, we're. I wouldn't say that we're friends. You
have you have a history of friendship, but you're not friends.
Correct, because we're two totally different people now.
Yeah, yeah.
Who he is and who I am, it's almost like kind of mind-boggling that we were ever friends.
Yeah.
Because we're so different now.
That game in the snow had a lot to show, because it showed you the realization of who you really were, and who he really was, because he, like you say now.
Yeah, he decided to go a different route, and once he went that route, I think he didn't know how to get back.
Yeah, it's sad when people do that. A lot of people I work with now, my clients, they make wrong choices, and I'm helping people get back to themselves. To help them understand the truest version of themselves, or the best version of themselves, because they might not be able to find it or vocalize it. You did. I did after a few mistakes, and kind of, I think sometimes for me, I had to almost see the other side to realise that this was my side, if that makes sense,
Yeah, definitely.
And then on from that, obviously you mentioned college there. How did you? And obviously we're talking about you as the man, but when you started out in music, and you obviously had choices. I mean, from what I understand, you were fairly educated at college. Did you ever consider any other careers? Choices that you made in yourself, knowing what your grandmother and your mum instilled in you. I'm sure there were conversations they probably had. You won't make no music being a rapper, and you should get a steady career. Did you ever do an apprenticeship? Was there anything that or did you just believe that you had a passion for it and a purpose? And the reason I ask that is because, again, trying to understand your mindset of how you made those choices. Some people who might watch this, my clients and future people that watch it, to see how you made what turned out to be the great decision, because obviously what you do, you love, and it's your livelihood. But there must have been a time when you, being 15, 16, 17, 18, going through college, seeing your friend go off that way, and the choices that you could have had, obviously having the stalwarts, that kind of safe space of your grandmother and your mother, teaching you those things and giving you that grounding for you to then be the man you are today, because I see you with Lachey and Milan. You've got a great little family. It's an inspiration for me, seeing you as a rapper and then thinking, man, he didn't get swallowed by, drugs or jewelry, or, you're quite a humble person. And in a way, I sort of resonate with you, because I see that in myself. When I earn good money, I think, I don't need a massive watch, a big gold chain. That doesn't make me any more than I know that I am. But exactly. For you, through those teenage years, when we are impressionable, when we can get sucked in, was there sort of big questions you had for yourself, and was there anyone else you used outside of your mum and grandma as an inspiration? I'll say things like, for me, like, obviously I read the Stoics and a lot of philosophy, but then people like Michael Jordan, there was a story that he tells when I talk to people about discipline and consistency. He tells the story about, when a little kid is learning how to walk, no one ever thinks it's a bad idea, so they keep going, even through the trials and tribulations. And at one day, God willing, everybody walks. I learned to walk about 8 or 9 months. My brother took about 2 years. But when we walked down the street, we both walked pretty good. And people like Michael Jordan became inspirations because of their mindset, because of their focus to do things. So when you find a difficulty in life, were there things, other people that you used to help you make a decision? And even going into the rap game, it must have been a big choice for you to sort of put your energy into that.
It was a risk, because when I was in school, when I was in college, I was on a track to work in the advertising agency, in the advertising industry. I wanted a career in advertising. I wanted to get a job at one of the big ad agencies on Madison Avenue. And that's all I saw. That's what I saw my life becoming. I was going to be an ad exec at one of these big companies. I was going to make a whole bunch of money and write all these really cool TV commercials and radio, print ad commercials. I had all these great ideas for ads, and so it was my second year in college that when I won this rap contest. That was the first time that I stepped on stage. This was 1985, second year of college. It was my first time stepping on stage in front of an audience of strangers, by myself.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it was in me that made me not fearful, that made me confident enough to get up there and rap and say these rhymes that I wrote. And the validation that I got from the crowd, the audience that was there, who they didn't know me.
Yeah.
They didn't know me. I was one of 30 people that were in the contest. And I got up there and I said these raps, and
you won.
The reaction, I ended up winning. The reaction to the crowd and the fact that I won, it did something. Something went off in my head, like, hey, maybe I'm kind of good at this. Like maybe maybe there's something here.
This is me,
But I still hadn't made the decision that this was something I was going to pursue.
Right.
But my prize was 6 hours of studio time with producer Marley Marl. So
wow, what a prize!
Right. So I had these 6 hours of studio time that I had won, and I knew that I was going to at least cash those hours in.
Yes.
I wanted to get my prize. So I spent about 7 months trying to reach him on the telephone before I finally got in touch with him.
Okay.
And I went into the first studio session and did a couple of demos. I could tell that he was just kind of pushing me off to the side. Like he sent the first day he sent me in one of the small bedrooms to work on beats with MC Shan. I met MC Shan the first day, and Shan wasn't a producer. He didn't know what the hell he was doing, but it was Marley's way of kind of getting rid of me.
Yeah.
Because he was obligated to give me these 6 hours, but he didn't want to have to deal with it.
Yeah.
So he pushed me off into another room. But then when it came time for me to actually record my first demo, his feedback from what he heard was the second little bit of validation. After that audience, that live audience, now I have a well-known producer that has records out on the radio and everything, and is on the radio every weekend playing music, telling me, "Yo, man, pretty good, man. Let's keep coming." So I reached the 6 hours. He's like, keep coming back, keep coming back. I want to record some more songs on you. So now he's spending his own time and money for me to record. So so these were just little bits of validation on the music side.
Yes.
But I was still in college and I was still pursuing my degree in marketing and advertising, because at no point did I think that this was going to be a career. I just thought, okay, I maybe one day my goal was to maybe get a song on the radio so I could hear my voice on the radio.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Yeah.
That's all I was really focused on. I just wanted to hear my song on the radio. And one of the demos that I made with Marley, he actually played it on the radio. And to my surprise, he didn't tell me he was going to do it. It wasn't a record. It never came out commercially. He just played it. And I came back to the neighborhood and people were like, "Yo, that was your song? Oh, I like that. You was rapping about our neighborhood." So another piece of validation.
Yes.
And the fact that he played it on the radio, that was validation.
Yeah, so you're getting these little inspirational moments, thinking, I've got my idea of a career. I'm following my mum and my grandma and doing something good, and I feel natural with that. You would have been probably being creative. You'd have been pretty good at it, but you were getting these little snippets. So what kind of made you? Was it a mindly thing? Was it a moment? Was it an internal thing? What was that for you?
So I think it became more official in my head and real in my head when they decided to do a video for the symphony, and the symphony turned into this huge phenomenon and huge record in the hip hop world.
Yeah, we had
a video for it, and so for the first time, people hearing my voice and seeing me on screen.
Yeah,
and being on TV in those days was a major event. Like everybody in my neighborhood was going crazy.
Yeah,
they couldn't believe it. And it was at that moment, because right around that same time, Big Daddy Kane, he had got his album deal. Craig G was working on an album deal. Cool G Rap had an album deal. And I'm like, well, I should get an album deal too. Everybody else got an album deal. I should get an album deal too. And Marley, we had worked on a lot of music at that point. And Marley was like, don't worry, you're going to get, because Cold Chill and the label wasn't really fully on board with me yet. They were like, we'll see. But Marley was confident that he was going to make sure that I got an album deal.
Yes.
So I just kept pursuing the songs, making the songs, because the conversation with Marley was, don't worry, we're gonna do a nice album, and they're gonna put it out. They're gonna put it out. And once that first album did come out, and they gave me the deal, that was really the beginning of my career.
And how did that balance with your wanting to get into marketing and advertising? Because obviously you've been working on a degree, and you knew then that you could have had a career doing that, and did what a lot of people do: get a career, get a mortgage, get married, and retire, get the gold watch. But obviously, getting an album deal is exciting, and probably seeing people like Big Daddy Kane and G Rap, those megastars that we all kind of of the rap game. And obviously now it's probably easy to look back in hindsight, but surely at that time you must have. Was there a little bit of ego, or were you always grounded to sort of think, I can get a record deal? Did you ever see that it could have been a career? I know obviously the validation point of it, but being quite grounded, down to earth, you didn't get sucked in by your, the hoods on the street saying, let's go and snatch some jewelry and make a bit of money. So how did that sort of materialize for you to think, yeah, this is cool, and I won a competition, and Marley Marl's pretty cool? So there must have been a bit of ego in that, which was different to the crime side, but still that thing of how you, what your thought process was, I guess, because a lot of people will, and the reason I ask that, there's always a method, is that sometimes people will want to believe in themselves and have a purpose, and they'll wash it aside because, it's safer if I get a career, it's safer if I do this, and I always say to people, look, that is, a ship is safe in the harbour, but that's not what it's meant to do, and obviously we can look back now and say, you were always meant to do this because you've been doing it for a fucking long time, let's be honest. But at that point, there must have been that seesaw balance of, getting into marketing and advertising. You would have been, earned good money and had a good job. So how did you?
So the background is this. I graduated from college in 1988. My mother, who I was living with, was on me. Like, she saw because I graduated, let's say I graduated in May. So June, July, August, during those months, I'm back and forth to Marley's house. I was driving, I would drive up to his house, we were recording music.
The battle was with Mum as well.
And my mother was like, what's going on? Like, you haven't done a resume, you haven't gone out and had any interviews. Like, what's happening? And I said, well, I won the contest. She knew I won the contest, and I'm like, I'm going back and forth to the studio. I'm working on some stuff. I kind of want to see where this goes. And she was like, no, we're not. That's not going to work.
That's not going to happen. Yeah.
You need to put your resume together. So I'm on the side. I'm trying to work on a resume, and so I can start potentially going out and doing job interviews. But to be honest with you, like, I didn't want to do that. Like, I wanted to just put my all into this and see where it went.
Yeah.
But I had to at least give the appearance that I was doing stuff.
Giving your mum lip service kind of thing, stalling her till you could,
Yeah. And so I remember that she used to leave me lists of things to do on the refrigerator before she went to work. She was going to work every day,
Yeah.
She was out of the house 8 o'clock in the morning on her way to work, and she didn't come back till after 6.
Yeah.
So I had the house to myself. I had free reign, and I was 21 years old, something like that.
Yeah.
And so she would leave these lists of things for me to do. It'd be like, get the clothes out of the dry cleaner, buy milk, buy eggs.
Yeah.
Do
your
clean
chores.
The bathroom.
Yeah.
So she, even at 21, but I was so locked in on the studio that this particular day, I woke up. I didn't even go in the kitchen because I was going to the studio. And I woke up, took a shower, got dressed, and went straight out the door. Didn't even go in the kitchen. And when I got back, I don't even know if I spent the night or if I came back super late that night. But a lot of times I would just stay the night. So I would go to Marley's crib, get there at like 12 in the afternoon, stay, make music all day, go to sleep, wake up in the morning, do more music, and then come home that evening.
Yeah.
So I think this was one of those days. So when I got back that next day, I hadn't done any of the things that were on the list, obviously, because I didn't even see the list. And she left a note on the refrigerator saying, I need you out by your birthday.
What, to kick you out?
Yeah.
Wow.
I need you out by your birthday. So that was her version of tough love, because what she saw was, to be fair, what she saw was her 20-year-old son
just being disobedient,
sleeping till 12-1.
Yeah.
Going out all times of night, sometimes not coming back to the next day, and not contributing at all to the household. And he has a college degree.
Yeah, what was this kid up to?
Yeah, what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
And so she put that note up, and it was like the symphony video. I'm trying to remember because it was definitely 89. So the symphony video had already come out. That's what it is. The symphony video had come out, so I had already kind of seen a little bit of success and a little bit of notoriety in the streets.
Yeah.
People knew who I was. I had some radio play.
Yeah.
So things were moving, but they weren't moving fast enough for her.
Yeah.
So it was towards the end of 89, and she was like, "Yeah, I need you out by your birthday," which would have been December of 89. And I got my album deal maybe a month or so
before your birthday.
Before my birthday, and I got my advance. And I was able to get my own apartment, and I actually moved out by my birthday.
Wow.
Which I don't think that she anticipated that. I don't think that her goal was to really kick me out. I think her goal was to get my attention.
Yes. Yeah. The psychology behind it would have been like, I'll scare the shit out of him. He's got to be out. If he's fooling around and doing nothing, if he can't substantiate these far-fetched dreams, then this will bring him back into line. That would have been her mindset. Yep. But you then kind of upset the odds, and it's like, well, I got my record deal, I've got my own apartment. I mean, was she proud of you, or was there any resentment there, or was there a bit of you're going to fail and don't come crying back to me?
No, she never took that approach. I think at some point she was proud but didn't really say it. I think she was surprised that...
Yeah, definitely surprised, yeah.
That this happened. I remember her coming over for the very first time to my apartment, and, there was dishes in the sink.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't want to hear nothing. This is my place, because she had a rule that there couldn't be a dish in the sink when you went to bed at night.
Okay.
And that was my job.
Yeah.
So if she woke up and there was a cup in the sink, I was gonna get woken up in the morning like, why is there a cup in the sink?
What's happening? What's going on?
Yeah. So
You're
I remember
slipping.
her coming over. I remember me saying to her, I don't want to hear nothing about my dishes. This is my place. This is my rules now. But it was all in kind of good fun. It wasn't
no malicious horribleness to it.
Yeah. No, it was more like, ha, ma, look, I can leave my dishes all night if I want.
And then did you ever go back to live at home, or were you independent from then?
From that moment, I've never lived under my mother's roof again.
Wow. And that was all down to hip hop?
All because of hip hop.
Wow, that's sick.
All because of hip hop. Yeah.
And then obviously, going forward to where you are now, obviously, your career and everything, and the trials and tribulations, and you're married now. And I gather, I saw an interview when you were talking about your MS, and, you kept it secret for a long time. So I guess you compartmentalize that as well. But you said something that really struck me, and I think that people watching this might resonate with that or could learn from that. When you said, you got some strength from your wife when she said, when you told her about your MS, and she said, "It's no problem. We got this. You got this." And almost that inspired me to do a video to say, listen, whatever it takes, if you want to achieve something, whatever it takes, you need to do what you got to do. The same with a disease, the same with an ambition, the same with a family, a relationship, whatever it was. And I wanted to sort of briefly touch on that, because it seems you get a lot of strength from your wife, and being with your mum, listening to your stories with your mum, finding your own wife and your own little family has given you another core strength that you've always got something to go back to,
Exactly. It's good to feel like you have a place to go that's home.
Yeah.
When my mom passed, when my grandmother passed in '98, and her apartment, which is where I was raised in Brownsville, Brooklyn, even though we had moved out, I would always come back to see her, and I always had my key, and I would come visit. I would put that key in the door, and she would be so happy to hear me coming home, and come running to the door, give me a hug and a kiss, and that was always still home base, even though I didn't live there anymore. That was still back to home. And then when she passed away, and we gave up the apartment and cleared all those memories out of the house, then we needed a new home base. That became my mother's house.
Yeah.
Even though I had moved out, I still had a key. I could still go back to her house. And so when my mother passed in '05, at that point, I had to create a new home base, and now that home base is where I live with my wife and my daughter. And the feeling of being able to go back to home base has always been kind of important to me, because it keeps you grounded. It's a safe place. It's the place where you can kind of just kick your shoes off and put your feet up and feel safe.
Yeah.
And that's what home is for me, and that's to this day. This is home base.
And would that be your sort of? I mean, I think for some reason my video thing's going to cut out like this soon. But would you say that's your greatest strength? You think your family, or do you find that somewhere inside you?
Yeah, my greatest strength is my family, for sure.
Yeah, so Ace, as we were saying, I presume that you get a lot of strength from your family, or is there an internal strength you have, or do you find, your wife and your daughter, they're the core of what gives you purpose and drives you?
Definitely my wife and daughter give me purpose and give me the strength, and that's what drives me when I'm out around the world somewhere touring, doing shows or whatever. That the comfort of knowing that I'm coming home to them.
Yeah.
That keeps me going. That keeps me motivated.
I recently got married, a month ago.
Yeah. Congratulations! I got to tell you that.
Thank you. And I'm a very old-fashioned person. My mum was a very strong influence in my life. She's Croatian, and she comes from a more sort of earthy, homely, tough love kind of upbringing, because they were sort of poorer people. They kind of had to survive. So my mum was my influence. And I always wanted to find my queen, to be the king of my castle, represent myself, who I wanted to be, but have someone by my side. So I had that, place of that safety, So when you talk of that, and in between, I've had, this is my third marriage, but third time's a charm. But, it was like what you said there about, having those people to come home to, your wife and your daughter. It's almost exciting, and you can't wait to get home. I mean, I see guys at work sometimes when I'm coaching, or if I'm doing a speech on mental health, and and people want to hang around, and I'm kind of like, man, I want to do my job, but then I'm also like, I can't wait to get home. Some guys, no, it's all right, we'll stay and do overtime. I'm like, why? Why do you work, man? Get home. It's
some people, some men don't find home to be that safe haven for them. They'll go to the bar.
Yeah.
They'll go someplace and sit in the car, go to the mall. Like, they just want to kill time.
Yeah.
And I never wanted to have relationship or a marriage like that where I dreaded going home. That doesn't sound like fun to me.
No, and even just that word there of, I wanted to kill time. For what? Time is precious, And even if you're not in a happy marriage, it's like, or whatever, it's like, do something that inspires you. I cut out drinking. I changed my diet a little bit. Obviously, doing this job, doing the qualifications, studying. I read a lot because I believe there's still so much more for me to learn, to be more of me, if that makes sense. Because when I'm the truest version of me, like doing this, I feel excited. I was a bit nervous, and then I thought, oh man, But speaking to you and just talking and chopping it up is like, it feels, when I'm coaching, I feel like I'm at home and I can work things out mentally. I see pictures and I'm like, yeah, you're doing this because maybe you feel that. And if you can find purpose there and asking you and getting the nitty gritty of your family. And it's really interesting to hear what you said about your mum and your grandma, because my mum was similar. But I had something in me that always knew, like Marcus Aurelius said, do the right thing because nothing else matters. And like your wife said, we got this. It doesn't matter what it takes. We will find a way. And that mindset, not everybody has that, And going back to that safe place of your wife and your daughter and having that, it's almost like nothing else matters. Do the right thing because the right thing will then come to you. Would you echo that?
Absolutely. And I was fortunate enough to find a wife that she makes up for the things that I lack. We balance each other out really, really well.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of ways, because she's very fiery. She's very fiery, and she's ready to take on any challenge. I'm a little bit more conservative, laid back.
Yes.
Kind of like I pay close attention. I let people do whatever garbage they're gonna do, and I don't let it affect me. I'm able to keep my persona to where I won't let outside forces affect me.
Yeah.
But there are times where you really should react differently to certain things, and she gives me that little extra spark.
Yeah. So do you? Because you seem a very controlled, disciplined, consistent, man.
That's me. That's me. And she's the opposite of that. I can pop off. She pops off quick, and in a lot of cases, I help her calm down from stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
She helps me be a little bit more aggressive about certain things, and I help her calm down when it comes to certain things.
And do you know what that says psychologically as well? Just for a little thing, when I pick up on things with people, when I'm coaching people, there's sometimes things in ourselves that we know we don't have, but we admire it in someone else. So you can have that with a friend. They're so funny. I want to be around them because they make me feel better about myself. And also the things that we fear in ourselves, sometimes that person, especially when we pick a partner, helps us face those fears because we're not that we're not brave enough, but sometimes we don't have that little DNA strand that they do have. So they will, like you just said there, which is really cool to hear when you said sometimes she makes me, it's funny, seeing her and I don't know her, but judging her persona, you said, she gets me to be a little bit more aggressive and a little bit more fired up, but quite rightly, you sometimes calm her down, let's chill, let's analyze the situation. You're like the Terminator, you look at the screen, you get the percentages, right, I think we should do this, this and this, where she's like, to hell with that, let's just let's burn Olympus and then we'll sort it out, kind of thing. I get that vibe. But that enhances both of you, and it's beautiful to see,
What I tell her is she has one tool in her toolbox and it's a hammer. Whereas I got a bunch of different tools that I can use to solve the same problem. Like sometimes a hammer doesn't fix what you want to fix.
But I can imagine her saying, yeah, but my hammer's pretty good for all situations. Do you know what I mean? And she has that confidence to say, I don't care, my hammer works for me well. She's like Thor, I'm just going to thunder and everything. And you're like, well, hang on a minute,
Yeah, let's use a Phillips head screwdriver on this one. think this would be a lot easier to
Yeah.
to fix the problem.
And then outside of that as well, because, you know, we touched on your mum and your grandma and then your wife, you know, is there anyone that you kind of had as like a sort of mentor, like a mental mentor? You know, I trained under Tony Robbins and Chloe Medinas, so he's a big, I don't know if you know Tony Robbins in the States, he's quite big as a life coach and motivational speaker, and he does all those things. And I also trained with another American actually called William Glasser, who developed a psychology called choice theory. But years ago, I read a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And because I read a lot, you kind of get inspiration from words spoken by other people. And like I said about, you know, Michael Jordan, and different times when you hear people say things, you think, oh, I want to be like that, or you take inspiration from that. And even though your mum and your grandma and your wife are great places, was there anyone outside of that, like a mentor or a teacher or someone else that you kind of, you know, took inspiration from to help you, or were those the main things from you?
I would say definitely my high school football coach. He was right. He was probably the first male figure, I would say, authority figure in my life, because even though I grew up in the same household with two uncles, they weren't really authority figures for me. Okay. They were there, but they weren't really that aggressive. They weren't really.
They weren't leaders. They weren't leaders.
They weren't. No, they weren't. They were not. They were not. They were kind of babied. My grandmother kind of babied them.
Right.
And so my mother was very determined that I wasn't going to be like them. And so, but when I got to high school, our football coach, he was the first kind of male authority figure that I had in my life. Somebody who was like, this is what we're doing. This is what you're going to do. And I just did it. Yeah. And I trusted what he was telling me was going to be helpful to me, and it was. Yeah. And there were some guys in my building. There was a guy, Jeff Barnes, that lived in the apartment right above our apartment. I saw him recently this past summer. He lived upstairs with his mom and two brothers, Russell and Osborne. And Jeff, he's older than me. He may be like 3-4 years older than me. But because I was the only child, he was like the closest thing to kind of an older brother.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
He kind of, you know, like I said, we lived upstairs from each other. So, I mean, he's one floor up, same apartment. And so early on, he kind of would show me some records, a couple of records he played for me. And he showed me the little racing cars and stuff like that, like AFX racing cars and stuff. And it was like a lot of cool things. I just like being around them because I didn't have a brother.
Yeah.
Brother.
Yeah.
And my uncles weren't really involved like that. So it's always good seeing him now. You know, he's about to retire from the job he's been at sanitation job he's been at for, 30, almost 40 years or something like that. But, you know, I saw him recently at what they call Old Timers Day. And I told him, I was like, yo, I don't know if you realize it, but like, you know, you were kind of like an older brother. You were like a mentor to me without even realizing it.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's really modest. Like, yeah, you know, I had older guys that I looked up to too, and blah, 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 blah. Like, he kind of played it. He downplayed it, but I just wanted him to know because I never really said it to him. Like, we've known each other 50 years or something.
Yeah, crazy.
And I never really pointed that out to him. And so I wanted to. And, you know, he was out there. His two brothers were out there. And maybe 2 days later, his oldest brother passed away, like right after I just saw. I never got to see his brothers because they were out there. And I was like, where are your brothers? He's like, oh, they left already. You know, they older, so they didn't want to hang around.
Yeah.
And so I didn't get to see his brothers. And then 2 days later, I found out the oldest one, you know, passed away, which was like kind of like made me kind of sad. Yeah. I mean, I hadn't seen him in many, many, many years since I was young.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you know, we just said, you know, we need to just continue to stay in touch and not let it just be for funerals and,
yes.
You know, just,
we can go on. Yeah. Sorry.
But Jeff Barnes, which, like I said, lived upstairs from me. He was one of the older guys. There was another guy in my building named Charles Hardison who lived one floor below me. And those were the two guys. And Charles used to rap. He was like the first person that I knew in my neighborhood that rapped. And he used to walk around with his big radio playing his raps. And we knew the words to his stuff.
Wow.
And he was like big and whatever big and buff was in those days, he was that. Like he looked like Mr. America or something. And he looked hench. Like what? He was like 18 years old, but he was like built. And all the girls loved him, and he had a nice afro.
Wow.
And so Jeff and Charles Hart, Jeff and Charles were the two guys that in my building, because like I said, one lived one floor up, one lived one floor down.
Yeah.
There were older guys that I kind of looked to, and they didn't give me like bad advice or bad information or try to steer me in a negative way. They were like more positive influences.
Yes.
So I'm sure they helped shape me. There was another guy I wanted to mention him. His name was Smokey. He lived on the 11th floor. Him and his brother Larry and their mother. And their mother later on got into a drug problem like around the crack era. But before that, Smokey, who was probably the shortest, most feared guy in the neighborhood. He was like, I don't know, 5 foot. He was short.
Yeah.
But he was built.
Yes.
Stocky.
Yeah.
And he wore thick glasses. Me describing him, you would never picture this guy to be a feared guy.
No.
He wore super thick glasses. He was Puerto Rican.
Okay.
He was built. He was super short. And everybody said he was everybody was afraid of him.
Was he on Long Hot Summer you had that character. Who the fuck is this? The guy on the what was his name?
Talking about Fats Belvedere.
Fats Belvedere. Yeah, was there a little inkling there from Fats? No.
No.
Because you describing him in my head, I'm like, yeah, that sounds like Fats, man. But
yeah, nah. But in those early days, 70s, we talking about late 70s.
Yeah.
Smokey ran one of the gangs in Brownsville, one of the rough gangs. But he lived in my building, and when I went to 7th grade, he would walk. My grandmother basically enlisted him to walk me to school. Wow.
Okay. What, she knew his mum?
She knew his mom, and she would always. His mom would come down and borrow food, money, different things, and she would. My grandmother was super generous, and she would give it to her, and his mom would always give it back. Next week, can I borrow this till next week? And she'd be like, sure,
yeah.
But
so Smokey was like by default one of your guardians through the grandmothers.
And I didn't even realize it like that.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that my grandmother had the insight to say, if I'm going to be sending him, because my walk to middle school was kind of far. It was like maybe a 40-minute walk to get to the school.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe 35 minutes, but she knew that I had to walk through Brownsville.
There were a lot of opportunities for you to get distracted by unneeded evils.
Not just get distracted, but get robbed, you get beat up, get stabbed. A lot of things could have happened to me on those walks.
Yeah.
So she basically enlisted Smokey, who also was in the school, meaning he was listed as a student, but I never once saw him in the building.
That was his cover.
Yeah. He was older than everybody else in the school because he had gotten held back a few times.
Yeah.
And so she like I said, she basically, she would feed him in the morning. He would come down, eat breakfast in our house, and then we walked to school together.
Yeah.
And on those walks to school, the people that we walked by, all the guys that were quote unquote threats, they didn't even look our way because of him. That's how feared he was.
Yeah.
And I remember this one particular day. This stands out to me because when I got to school every day, we would kind of sit in this little park right outside the school. And then when the bell rang, I would go inside and I would go be the student. And Smokey always stayed in the park with these other kind of goon guys. And one day, the bell rang. I just said, I just wanted to just kind of stay and hang back and kind of see what was going on out there. So I didn't go into school. Bell rang. Everybody cleared out, went to school. And I'm sitting in the little park with Smokey's guys. He didn't notice. He was talking to some girl on the side.
Yeah.
And so the guys that were there, none of these guys actually were enrolled in school. They were just street dudes. And one of them takes out a little gun. He starts passing it around and looking at it like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, boom. And Smokey notices me still outside. He runs over. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm just kind of hanging out. Nah, he's like, no, take your ass into school. This ain't you.
Cool, yeah.
He said, this ain't you.
Yes.
You go to school. Don't ever do that shit again. He kind of cursed me out and sent me on my way. And that was a huge...
That must have been a mad moment, because, you know, for someone like that, you know, kids like you say, your friend that you went and played football with in the snow that got sucked in, you know, but Smokey kind of knew you to say, listen, this isn't you. He didn't try and say, yeah, come on, you can be one of my little lieutenants or whatever. Exactly. You know, and that's a beautiful moment, because, you know, it's funny for me, you know, when I was growing up, I made a transgression and I ended up going to prison. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it showed me who I wasn't, you know. And when I spoke to my dad about, you know, what can I do? What can I be? He never really gave me advice. He just said, look, you can be anything you want to be, because you have that natural proclivity to do that. But I never had those kind of people. And it sounds like, you know, I can see it's quite an emotional moment for you. But, you know, Smokey was that guy that helped, you know, that you were kind of curious, but never... You know, you didn't get sucked into it, and he wouldn't let you do that. And that must have been something from your grandmother as well, whether he knew better from his mum as well.
Right.
You know, and that's kind of a beautiful thing, because a lot of people don't have that, or they don't find that, or they get lost in themselves. You know, and with the work I'm doing, I help people find themselves to be their truest version, you know, but for the good of who they want to be, not who they necessarily are. And your sort of story, it's funny because I think you're quite a private man, and, you know, a self-reliant man, but with your strengths of your family, the sort of influence of your grandmother and your mother, and even moments like this, you know, talking about Smokey, you know, it's a beautiful little story, you know, which means a lot to you. And obviously there's more to it than that, because you probably have more, you know, the enormity of that moment is a beautiful thing, because there's probably kids that didn't like your best friend, you know, that you played football with. He went off and ended up in a different... He probably found a Smokey he probably found the wrong Smokey, you know?
Right. I just often wondered, like, had he had a different reaction, what my life could have ended up like. Yeah. Had he encouraged me to stay outside, that potentially could have become a habit. Like, oh, I'm not going inside the school anymore. I'm gonna hang outside with these guys and do whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
And they were smoking weed and handling guns. That's what they were doing.
Yeah. So you saw that as well.
Yeah, it was all happening right there, and I never attempted to stay outside again
because of what
the way he spoke to me. Because, like I said, you know, this guy's like older than me. Even though he's shorter than me, he's big and strong. Yeah. And he was feared in the neighborhood, and so I knew I wasn't trying to tangle with him.
Yeah, you knew he would muck you up.
Yeah, I actually wrote a song about him that hasn't come out yet, called "Smokey Says."
Smokey Says, yeah, man, you should release that. I'll be interested in that. That's dope, man. That's good. And then, you know, from that as well, did you? Because obviously, when you sat there in that moment and said, "I'm not going into school," do you think that was like a curiosity that just had a good ending because of what Smokey did, or do you think you would have naturally found your internal? You know, I'll say it this way, because, you know, I took the wrong path and I didn't have a Smokey, and I wasn't influenced by someone to go into a gang. We were a little bit poor. You know, I felt as the oldest child of the family. My dad wasn't a great father or a husband. He wasn't a bad man. He just wasn't, right. You know, and when my mum and dad separated, it was kind of left to me. And in my naive, stupid way, I thought, well, I need to get money, so I'm going to do what I got to do to get some money, and that ended me up in prison. But when I went there, I kind of thought, I had an epiphany, like, this isn't me. This isn't, like Smokey said to you, this isn't you. Do you know what I mean? Right. So right. Do you think you would have found that yourself anyway? Or do you think you could have got sucked in? Because you never went off with your football buddy when he went off to go and snatch jewelry. You never did that. So do you think you might have been curious, but you wouldn't have actually done anything?
the Smokey incident happened when I was in 7th grade, and the incident with my friend happened a couple of years later. So maybe part of me knowing not that I wasn't going to go with them was connected to, and I never even thought about it this way, but hearing Smokey say, "This ain't you.
Yeah.
You go to school.
Yeah.
That's you." Basically, he's like, your grandmother ain't gonna be mad at me, so you're gonna go. Handle those books. That's what you do.
Yeah.
And so that messaging must have stuck.
100%. Yeah. Your subconscious definitely would have taken that in, and a couple of years later, you would have said, "This is not me. I need to handle my business in another way."
So part of why I didn't go with those guys to go snatch jewelry that day, part of it, and I'm realizing this now in this moment, I'm realizing is that it was that incident with Smokey, that very important incident where he told me that this ain't you.
Smokey's the man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a deep moment. That's a deep moment, man. So yeah, so I guess like you said, Charles. What was the other guy's name?
Jeff Barnes.
Jeff Barnes, Charles, and Smokey. They were kind of sort of older guys that kind of helped guide you a little bit without you knowing it, but just sort of through just their age, you looking up to them, not having a brother. Same for me. I didn't have an older brother, so it was kind of like, I always wanted that. Mainly because where I lived, it wasn't really like any. It wasn't a dark, horrible place, but there were lots of people that fought. We have a thing in England called like the Pikeys and the Gypsies. So there's a town near me where a lot of them were. So, and they're all fighters. That's why I became a boxer. I did amateur boxing because I wanted to look after myself. And it was a little bit of an insecurity in me, so I wanted to toughen up. But, there was a lot of chance that you could get into fights. So, I kind of didn't have to avoid those things. But when I made the choice, it was through wanting money and to look after myself and have a little bit of money for the family. But obviously that taught me a lesson of who I wasn't anyway. Because when I was sat in prison, I read a couple of books and I thought, man, I need to educate myself. I don't know how I'm going to change. Well, I do know. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I just know I'm not going to do this shit anymore, And it was kind of like you in a way. I guess Smokey and them guys there, they kind of helped you, find the true version of you, with your grandma and your mum. And then when you went to college and won the rap competition, obviously the rest is history, but it's still part of you, who you are, and you made a choice. You decided to do those things. We sometimes people say, well, it wasn't my choice that I did that and that, and it is like we still make even subconscious choices. So that definitely would have had an impact on you, and it's interesting to hear that and see that, because we don't get to know those stories about people. We see the outside. Obviously for you it's even more, but people see me, and my sisters will say, well, David, you're so confident, you're this, you're that, blah blah blah, you can do anything. But it's like, yeah, but I still have my fears and my insecurities and my, so I have to gain strength from places, hence why I asked you about your wife and your mum and your grandma and those things and those guys that that were important to you, and obviously with Smokey there, I think you should definitely release that song. I'm kind of like, man, I want to hear what you have to say about him as the person, with his glasses and his, it'd be cool to see a video if you did a little animation of what the character would look like. That'd be funny, man.
Yeah, well, the song is it's almost done. I think we're gonna try to put it out as one of the bonus tracks for the reissue of Richmond Hill. So we're gonna put like 2 or 3 bonus tracks, and I think that's gonna be one of them. I just gotta get the hook together because I never worked on the hook.
Cool. And do you and aside from that, obviously we talked about your sort of upbringing and history. Is there anything that you use yourself? Like, do you have any phrases that you use that you kind of that help you in moments, or do you do any sort of? Because I know with your MS, you do. I think you've changed your diet a little bit. I remember when we met.
I've changed it a lot.
I remember when we met in Nottingham. A funny story. You gave me a hoodie from the guys in Poland because you said it was really heavy. Do you remember the big red thing?
Yeah.
And I remember you gave me this hoodie. Well, when I put my hand in the pocket, there was some pistachio nuts in there. And I remember you were eating them, and I thought, well, he's obviously doing it for his health. And then now I eat a lot of pistachios because they're very healthy. So I've changed my diet a little bit. So I eat a lot of red meat, a lot of eggs, and a lot of natural stuff. So pistachios are one of the things I ate. But when you gave me that hoodie, I remember putting it in my pocket and I was like, oh, there was a handful of pistachios, man. And I was like, it was just funny. But obviously learning to cope with your MS and the things you do with that. But is there anything that you use mindly, like a phrase or, I do sometimes. There's little things when I find myself struggling or I find, and my mum's a Roman Catholic, so I grew up with a kind of religious input, but I have my own journey with God and spirituality for myself. My wife is very, she believes very strongly, so I have my own, because I'm also a man of science and philosophy. So, but you end up connecting with your spirituality. So a lot of times when I find myself in a challenge, and I don't know how you feel about this, but there's sometimes when there was a great phrase, and I think Morgan Freeman or Anthony Hopkins did it when they said, "Oh God, please give me strength to overcome this difficult moment." It's like, no, I'm not going to give you strength. I'm going to give you the difficult moments so you can become stronger. Then it's like, well, at least give me some wisdom so I can then be intelligent to get through this moment. And it's like, no, I've given you a brain so you can learn to be wise in that to outthink that position. And then he said, well, please at least give me patience so I can endure this moment. And it's like, no, I've given you everything you need. The challenge, the difficulty, and the how hard it's going to be is everything you need inside yourself. So sometimes I tell myself that to look at those moments as a challenge, as they're not obstacles, they're part of my path. And I tell myself that, and I have these little mantras that I try and think, right, I'm going to do this, and then I quote Epictetus or, just do the right thing because nothing else matters. And, it's not what happens, it's what you do. Like what your wife said about your MS, it don't matter what we need to do, we'll just do it. Is there anything that you would use for yourself? Do you have any sort of mental phrases or things that you revert to maybe to help you through difficult times? Because touring and being away from the family, and even though you love to get home, there must be times when you think, man, I'm in this shitty hotel somewhere, bloody, flicking through the channels, doing a thing. It's like, ugh, boring, you know what I mean? And I know you get to see lots of places, but it must take a strain on your mental state, if you like.
Yeah, so I don't have any particular mantras or phrases, but I've always approached touring and whatever life circumstances throws my way as just part of the journey. I just understand that even when there's a setback or something that happens that's unfortunate, I never let it kind of get to my core. Yeah. I just go, okay, that thing has happened. Let's figure out a way to approach and tackle that so that we can get to where we're trying to get to. Nothing stops the train. There are things that are obstacles that you just have to figure out how to go around, and that's what I've always tried to do. Is I just assess the crisis and then I figure out the right way to navigate that. To navigate that, yeah.
And I say you saying that is a great way, because you said nothing's going to stop the train, and it's a great thing when I say to people, if you never quit, you can't fail. You might learn, there might be different ways that you learn not to do it, but unless you quit, you can't fail. And if you keep your eyes on the prize as such, that's your focus, that's where you want to be. If you keep going, like you say, on that train, well, the train might have to stop and, be put on another track and have some connections and this, that, and the third, but you're always going in that direction. So you always have that as just an internal belief. Do you think that's just something that's ingrained in you?
That's ingrained. That's how I've always lived. This is where I kind of help my wife sometimes, because sometimes things happen or circumstances happen, and she's all up in arms, and I'm like, let's just figure out how to fix it. That's it. Like, wow, you can sit here complaining about what has happened, but instead of doing that, let's just figure out what the solution is.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, and that's sometimes it's funny, with men and women, the feminine energy and the masculine energy. Men are more problem solvers and, we'll find a solution, and we almost like a challenge. That's what humans are built for anyway. But women have that more emotional thing, and then her natural sort of her natural proclivity for her personality, as you said, she's more aggressive, and she's got her hammer. She would sort of get stressed in those moments. I can see. I don't know. Whereas it's funny with my partner, she's kind of the opposite in the sense that nothing seems to faze her, and I'm kind of like, well, doesn't that bother you? I mean, I have a mindset where it doesn't matter what happens, we'll always find a way. And sometimes she'll get stressed, and I'll say, well, it doesn't matter. Look, whatever we got to do, we'll do it. She said, oh, we need to get school costumes and this, that. I said, well, we'll just get them then. And she kind of worries about those things, but then she doesn't have that side that panics. It's almost like she doesn't get annoyed. Where I say I'm passionate. Some people might say that you're not passionate because you're very composed. But that's ridiculous, because to be creative, you have to have passion, Whereas your wife is obviously, people say, well, yeah, she's definitely a fiery, redhead, crazy, she's crazy, man, but she's not. It's just her, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, she's very passionate, and when she's passionate about something, she's gonna let you know about it. Yeah. In no uncertain terms, and in the loudest volume that she can muster.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of the opposite. I'm passionate, but it's a quiet passion that I'm in control of.
Yeah.
And I can more clearly direct that passion to where it needs to be.
Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, look, it's been really great chopping it up with you, man. We've covered a lot of things. I didn't know where it was gonna go. I mean, look, I don't want to run out of time, but it's ticking down the last 4 minutes, so. It's been really interesting. I didn't know what to kind of expect, and it's good to learn a little bit more about you. I mean, is there anything you would want to, for people that are watching this, that maybe, struggle? Because a lot of my clients, they're lost inside themselves, or they can't get out of their own way for themselves. So I help them with different, psychological practices, all the stuff I do, and I'm kind of a little bit very organic, and I can read people very well. I study non-verbal communication, all these different things, and I formulate a plan to help them understand themselves. But is there anything, as Duval, as the husband, as Masta Ace, as something you would say to people maybe that is a good... I mean, you've mentioned a lot of things, so there's a lot that people could take from it, but is there anything you would say as a kind of a closing word that would be a good... that people could use? They could take it away.
What I'll say is this. I recently, so for my entire career, I've done music. I've worked on albums, written albums. Usually it takes me about, 3 to 6 months to write an album.
Yeah.
Maybe a year at the most. But usually it's like, 3 to 6 months, and then it takes a while to mix and all of that. So it might take a year to do an album. But writing part is only probably like 3 to 6 months. And just recently I've taken on this new role, or this new position of being a playwright, and I started writing a musical.
Yeah,
and
I've seen you talk about that. Yeah,
this musical has taken me 7 years to write.
Wow!
So the amount of patience and stick-to-itiveness that it took for me to go in and stick to my guns and get it accomplished, it just showed me that there's so much more that I can do than I realized. I didn't think I could focus in for 6.5 straight years and write something to its completion.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of showed me something about myself. We have the ability to make those kind of adjustments, and we should challenge ourselves to do more than what we think we're capable of.
Yeah, and there's a great saying, and I use it with a lot of people, that we're much more capable of what we believe we can do. And
Absolutely.
When you challenge yourself, and I always say in your darkest battles you find your greatest strengths, and it's when you challenge yourself you discover things. Like I said earlier, the ship is safe in the harbour, but that's not what it's designed to do. And you could go out there, like you just said, you can write an album. You won the rap contest. You worked with Marley. He was like, yeah, come and do more. You took your career away from doing advertising into that. You proved your mum right but wrong, because you had something in you. So that's another cute little story. But it's like when you challenge yourself, you find you're much more capable in those tricky positions, you learn more about yourself, you know, and in your darkest battles, you find your greatest strengths. And sometimes when I've faced those fears, even tonight, you know, like I kind of like, obviously, because it's weird, you know, we did a song together, and I was really humbled that you got involved with the track. Thanks to Sticks, the beat was great, so you liked the beat, and the song we did was pretty cool. Mankind was a message, you know, about us. What are we doing? But it was like there was fears that I had in myself, but I know I wanted to face them. And then when I did them, I kind of found out that it was like, wow, I can actually do so much more. And doing this now with my coaching and speaking to you, you know, I was even a bit nervous, like, oh, what questions am I going to have? How's it going to go? What am I going to say? Am I going to freeze? But it's been like a pleasure, and it's right. I think it's a good note to end on, that, you know, we're capable of so much more. So believe in yourself and maybe go for those things that you think you can't do, you know, like your musical, taking you. I mean, when are you going to get it done, man? We've been sitting here waiting for 6 years, you know, and I heard you talk about it. I mean, are you far away or?
The Falling Season is the name of the musical, and we are opening in London. We're working on funding right now, but the goal is to open in London.
Wicked, man. I want tickets.
Yes.
100%. All right, Ace, listen, it's going to cut out, but it's been a pleasure. I thank you for your time. Give my love to the girls, and we'll hook up soon, yeah?